Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Percentile Vice, where we do actual plays, talk about TTRPGs. I'm Steve, normally your keeper of arcane lore, but also host of this. I'm joined by my co-host, Emily. Wave to the camera there, Emily. And John, you know all of us, but we are honored tonight to have a very special guest, Vincent, with that TableCatGames, where we're going to talk about his newly released Jumpstart for his game Street Wolves. Vincent, tell everybody who you are, where they can find you.
I'm PVincent or Vincent or Paul. I have many names. TableCatGames is my Twitter. You can find me various other places, but mostly I stick around Twitter all day. And yeah, I'm making some games, basically one game right now. I have ideas for other ones. I've also been in a few APs with Crossroads Games by Carrie Smith. But mostly I just lurk on Twitter all day and say things to people. Retweet. That's all I do.
That is great. So you have been really active on Twitter.
Too much.
This is where we met, and I've been watching the build up and then the release for your Jumpstart for Street Wolves. So a lot of people out there have seen it, but they haven't heard about it. So let's talk about that. Tell us about the setting. Where is Street Wolves? What does that world look like?
So the most accurate description would be it's a synthwave infused neo-noir retro-futuristic action adventure. That's the fancy title. Basically, it boils down to being rad and a bit moody. Tech is a bit ahead of where it actually was in the 80s, so it takes place in the late 80s. But it's kind of like it's seen through this synthwave lens, which we can get more into in a bit if you want. But it's got cool colors and cool cars and ragtag heroes and kind of like a mixture of everything I grew up with, plus this whole synthwave aesthetic thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I see. I was 16 in 1980, right? So I was at the age I could really enjoy the 80s. I really love the way the artwork for your Jumpstart really kind of captures that neon synthwave vibe of the whole thing. So you said a word earlier, or a combination of words, retro-futuristic, which on its face seems like it's opposites, retro and futuristic. But if I understand you, and I want you to explain it a little bit more, but it's that this is the 80s, but the 80s that's a little bit more futuristic than the one we remember.
Right, it's a little amped up. So futurism is a concept or a movement of anticipating what will become. So, like if we're sitting here right now, what will the future look like? And we try to map that out or come up with ideas. Retrofuturism is actually remembering that anticipation. So it's a look back at the future that the past imagined. Probably one of the most well-known examples of it would be Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, that movie a bunch of years ago. Okay. That would be an example of like 1940s retrofuturism, right? So Street Wolves is a retrofuturism of the 80s. So, we were on the cusp of the digital technology. CD-ROMs were, they're around, but like there's all these weird integrations of technology like video phones, which didn't really take off, but they existed, right? Just PDAs, just things that didn't quite make it until like we had smartphones, right? Like once the smartphone, it like married all these technologies into one thing, and then it's like mainstream and everyone has one. I also say there's a concept too in this that I lean towards is cassette futurism. So that's that future envisioned in sci-fi in the 70s and 80s, like what you'd see in the in Alien, right? That mother computer with the big keyboards and CRT monitors, or the movie Outland with Sean Connery. I really like that tech where it's like it is the future, but we're using like cassette tapes and stuff.
That's really cool. So, John, you're a child of the '80s. You're probably close in that time frame with where PV was at. So, what do you think when you're thinking? And do you have any questions specifically for PV about that?
Well, I remember like the first little bit of contact I had with it. The immediate memory it brought up was the first trailer for Grand Theft Auto Vice City, where you hear the flock of seagulls playing, and you're like, "Whoa, what?" And then as it unfolds in front of you, you're like, "Oh man, I've got to play this game." And it didn't let me down, and I don't think the Jumpstart has come close to letting me down either at this point, because it has a lot of the vibes. It doesn't feel like anything I've seen before. It looks really cool, and I didn't read the adventure because I knew Steve was probably going to want to run us through it, and I didn't want to get spoiled. But the rest of it is so cool.
Well,
And
thank you.
I just wanted one thing I did want to ask you. One of my favorite newer franchises has been The Expanse. You may not have heard of it, but it's like hard sci-fi. Basically what happened was the authors got together because one of the authors got a hold of the other one's TTRPG world building, and they were like, "Oh man, this is so cool. Have you ever thought of making a book from this?" And they ended up making 9, and it spun out into a TV show. If you were to have Street Wolves as a TV show, book series, movie, who would you want playing the lead characters?
Um, well, so first of all, I'd be very excited, and I would love a check from Hollywood. So if anybody is
Right.
listening right now, I'm very open to whatever you can offer. Um, I would say, first of all, I would like, I want to say that like I would actually prefer it to be a TV show like on HBO Max, because TV shows now seem like movies but are longer, like Peacemaker or Mandalorian or something like that. Um, but I would say that I'm kind of out of touch with modern pop culture, like who the celebrities are. They're people I don't know because, like, I don't know. There's probably somebody on not Twitch, TikTok that has like 10 million followers. I've never heard of it, but they'd probably be the star of the movie. I would just be happy if the cast looked like the pre-gen characters or the artwork or whatever. Like I would just be happy. I as long as they were good at acting. I know
Well,
that's kind of a non-answer.
Keanu Reeves is still active, so
But yeah, I mean, we have like some of these elder statesmen of the the 80s and 90s around, but like I think of like, who would be the 20-year-olds today in those, the younger Street Wolves, and I really don't know.
So, synthwave. This retro futuristic '80s, but you made sure it was important to you to put this synthwave vibe into it. So, tell us a little bit about how that affected your development of this world that Street Wolves is in.
So I'm going to tell a really long story here, and I apologize. When the game started, it's the idea nugget was it was going to be a GI Joe game. Like I wanted to make a GI Joe game, and I made the GI Joe game. It was called Operation Wolfpack, or Special Mission Force Wolfpack, or whatever. It kind of went through a couple names, And I made this game, and I used Open D6 rules from West End Games. They did the original Star Wars RPG. So I ran it for a while, like just with my friends. Like we ran it consistently for like over a year, and then it kind of petered out a little bit. And then I did a Miami Vice crossover. Like literally, they were GI Joes in the world of Miami Vice, and it was a really big hit with the players because they were like, you know, there was like a volleyball scene, and there was going to the mall and all this stuff. And so I kind of got tired of that game's rules. So the whole project kind of died. And then the pandemic happened, and I had nothing to do besides, I was working from home and I didn't really have anything to do. And it kind of came to me that I could revive that concept. So I'm getting around to the point. I started bringing in some of the things that are associated with synthwave, like the big grid. You see that grid, and then the mountains is kind of in the artwork a little bit. And a good friend of mine, Jason Ho, he said, "Why don't you incorporate synthwave more into it? Like just really lean into it." And I was a little reluctant at first, but as I did that, it just became its own thing, and it just felt really right. Like it was like the missing puzzle piece to this game to really drive forward the artwork, the story, and everything. It was just like this magical marriage. So, I'm really thankful for Jason for giving me that suggestion.
That is an awesome origin story. Emily, Emily, what are you thinking about all that? Have you got any questions for Street Wolves in general for PV?
So like I've told you before, I'm not a child of the 80s, so a lot of this is new to me, and I kind of think that's kind of cool that we've got like people who lived through the 80s, people who were like kind of alive during the 80s, and then there's me who's a brand spanking new 90s kid. But I really like the synthwave thing. It reminds me a lot of media that I've seen just in my lifetime, and I've always thought it was really cool. That like neon half cyber is amazing. And in my head, all I can think of is how everybody kind of upset that if you look at like Back to the Future, how we had hoverboards in 2015 and like now we don't, and it's kind of like futuristic 80s, but like they kept the 80s thread all the way up into 2015, and it's really cool, and I'm really excited to see how it plays out. And if I'm going to get a lot of the references in it, given that I wasn't, around for it. But no, I am just super excited to be here and to get to hear about your project, because writing modules is something I would really like to be into. So I'm just really excited to be here.
Cool.
Well, if you have any questions at any time about working on modules or whatever, like I'm learning too, and I'm happy. And, we have this whole community on Twitter right now where so many folks are super helpful and encouraging that, like, I would say really plug into that.
Yeah, thank you. I will.
So, on this wonderful layout that John's put together for us, there's a lot of the artwork that's in the Jumpstart, cycling through on our Twitch screen. What kind of collaborations were you able to get into as you were making Street Wolves in general, and then Jumpstart specifically?
So I've been really grateful to get the help of a bunch of different friends and artists to kind of lend their hand or their ideas. So I mentioned Jason Ho. He's honestly one of the hardest working artists I know. He's an art director for Bongo Comics. They do like those Simpsons stuff. And he was the Street Wolves art director, but he had to he's kind of stepped down to work on his own things. But he was super crucial, like I said earlier, to the early stages of the project, like leaning the synthwave or running ideas. I'd come to him with ideas for stuff, and he'd really help me work through a lot of like art questions. and he actually ended up designing so Wolfpack is a thing in Street Wolves. He designed the Wolfpack logo. I don't know if it's like a wolf with a scarred eye.
That's a great piece
Yeah,
of art. I love that.
I was just stunned because I wanted something that was kind of like, in G.I. Joe, there's that Cobra logo where it's real simple. I wanted something really simple that was like maybe 2-3 colors, and he really knocked it out of the park with that. But I've also worked with buddy Michael Todd. He's Jurassic Todd, mostly online. He's one of my closest confidants on the project, and he did all the art for the Pregen characters. So he did, all those, and then it's not in the Jumpstart, but there is a Cabal of Shadows, which is one of the primary antagonists in the game. He did the logo for that, and it's just killer. It's this skull with the earth, and it's so cool. I shared it a long time ago. I'll have to share it again, but that thing, it looks cool and scary. But there's some other artists on the project for Nataly Zhuk, Gunmetal Draws. He did the equipment, so like the pager and all that stuff. I'm trying to think. I'm forgetting. Curtis Square. He did the cover, which is so awesome, and I believe that's probably over half the downloads are just based on that cover alone. So.
Yeah, so I love that cover art, and then you turned it into kind of a movie poster, which was really smart. I thought, the making it look like what you'd see outside the theater for coming attractions, the next movies they're coming out. John, you spent a lot of time looking at all the artwork through the Jumpstart and getting it lined up for our Twitch feed here. What did you notice? What kind of questions do you have about the art that went into all of this?
I just wanted to reiterate something I heard that I thought was super cool. Jason Ho is the guy who did the uniforms for Star Trek Lower Decks, right?
He did the pitch uniform, which ended up being very close to the final uniform. So yeah, he's done a ton of stuff, but that's one of the coolest things. And actually, I went to C2E2, and there was one guy I saw dressed up in a Lower Decks uniform, and I took his picture and I sent it to Jason, and he was just like ecstatic, like somebody that would wear, he really digs when people cosplay as Lower Decks characters. So.
Well, I definitely wouldn't mind doing that at some point if our resident seamstress. But I really like there was a spread that I thought about putting some pieces of in the teaser stuff and was like, no, let's let them get the jump start to see that, because it really was one of my favorite pieces in the entire thing. And just from what you're seeing here, it's only a small taste of the actual art that's in the Jumpstart, and it makes me, I'm practically salivating for the book itself, because if it's all done with this amount of care and passion, it's going to be spectacular.
I've been very adamant, and I really appreciate the artists that have been willing to work with me, because I have this vision of like they should look like they. Sometimes you say this thing should looks like this thing, and then somebody has this idea, and the characters all end up looking like they're from now, but with weird haircuts or something. But I take examples of actual people from the 80s. They say, let's use this kind of look, and then the artists will go, okay, and then they'll run with it. They have these incredible takes on it that are just, I'm always astounded when I get something back and it's just like better than what I had imagined. But I said on Twitter the other day that I'm getting a tax refund, and so that will help fund more art, because my art budget was in a negative when I released the Jumpstart, and I was like, where am I gonna get money for more awesome art? So thankfully, the government is gonna give me some of my money back. So
Nice. So we've talked about the setting and what inspired you, and that great origin story, starting with GI Joe to get you to Street Wolves. Um, so let's talk more now about the game itself. You utilize the Savage World core system for this game. So let's talk a little bit about, for those people that are watching and know they're interested in Street Wolves, but need to know a little bit about what the mechanics are built on. And before I kick it over to you, I'd just like to point out that they're on the screen. You know, if you hit exclamation point Street Wolves, then it'll give you a link off to go get the Jumpstart yourself if you haven't already got it. So,
John's
fancy. Wow.
John did his work here. So,
could you put in my PayPal account in there too? So,
yeah, just link that right in there.
Good. So,
is that the itch link in there?
I believe it is, and
if it is, I just want to say, if you give any money to the Jumpstart until the end of March, I'm giving the money to humanitarian aid in Ukraine, because Nbug is the artist. Nataly, she is Ukrainian, so I asked her if she needed anything, and she said just donate money to us to help us out. So
yeah, that is awesome, and I know they appreciate it, and thank you for doing that. So we're gonna get more into the specifics of Street Wolves and the Jumpstart here in just a minute, but let's lay a little bit of a foundation. Savage World, game system that's different from 5e and some other game systems out there, and it's your skills are based on a certain die size. You know, start off at D4, and then it can progress up to a D12, and then you'd roll those dice to try and hit target numbers, whether it's to hit somebody or to successfully complete something. But tell me what you like about Savage Worlds, and why you decided to use Savage World as the underpinnings of Street Wolves.
So we talked about the origin of Star Wars West End games turning into G.I. Joe. When I was looking around at systems that I could use, because I'm not really a mechanics guy, I'm more story. So I wanted to use a system that existed out there that I could use the mechanics and then adapt them to fit what was in my brain. And when I found Savage Worlds, it was sort of similar in some respects to that Star Wars system, where it was skill-based, except instead of using dice pools, so in Star Wars, if you wanted to shoot, you could have like 3d6 or 5d6 or whatever. One of the reasons why I ended up not liking it is when my characters or the players leveled high enough, you don't really level, you advance, but they would be rolling these huge piles of d6s, like 7d6, which is fun, but it also slows the game down when you're trying to add up all these d6. This is similar in that it's skill based, where you have a fighting or you have a whatever, and you only roll the one. Well, you roll 2 dice, but you have 1 die associated to that skill. So fighting would be a d4 up to a d12, and then you also roll a second die, which is your wild die, which I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but that gives you a chance to succeed if your initial skill die or trait die, you fail on that. And it's the thing I like too. There's so many things that I like about Savage Worlds, so I'm gonna try not to talk your ear off. But one of the things at its core is most times you're rolling, you're trying to beat a 4, which is really easy to remember. You know, it's a +1 or 2 or whatever, but you still got to try to beat a 4. It's not a sliding scale. Or, you know, I used to play games. I used to play a lot of Star Wars Saga Edition, and that's kind of like D&D, where, you know, the skill number can be, you know, 10, 15, 20. You try to determine how hard it is as a GM as you're running the game. This is like 4. It's, you know, I'm sorry, you can't beat a 4. You know, let's move on. But there's that. There's I like that it's classless, so you don't pick a class and then you go down this path. You can be, you know, a hacker that is also a ninja, right? You don't have to go down this path. And in Street Wolves, the core book, and the Jumpstart reflects this a little bit, but it's kind of hidden, is that there's professions that when you make your character, you get a little bit of a bonus for being a driver. You know, you get a bonus for driving, and you get certain gear. But once that's done, then you do whatever you want with that character. And you don't have to use professions either. I should add that. It's just an option. But, you know, it's to try to encourage certain character types. But I really like that you use, and I think you wanted to bring this up, was hindrances and edges. You use hindrances are basically negatives for your character. Like maybe they're a little cowardly, or they shoot their mouth off, or something like that. You pick a couple of those generally, and then you pick, you know, they give you a little bit of points or whatever for building your character. And then you pick edges, which, like, what are some things your character's particularly good at? And that further develops your character. Like, he's a quick draw, or shoots really fast, or does crazy acrobatics. All those are like edges. And combined, you make this character concept that's, you know, and in play it works out really well.
Yeah, I really like the edges and hindrances part of the Savage World system, right? Because that being a classless system, that's the things you can use to make your character unique.
And what they're good at. Yeah.
Right. And there are dozens and dozens of choices in just the core Savage Worlds book that you can pick. So, like you said, I think hacker and a ninja, right? There are edges out there to let you be good at both things. So you're not tied down to, I'm just a hack and slash fighter, or I'm just the party's healer, right? You can form yourself the way you envisioned this character. So I really like that one classless system, and then the use of those hindrances and edges to create the character that you really want. I also love the hindrances. Look, in like 5e and some other games, you know, maybe you have a flaw, and maybe you find an occasion to role play that flaw a little bit, so it gives you a nice rounder character. This game system really pushes that, right? You've got these hindrances that are going to affect you anywhere. It not only gives you a character flaw that is role playable, but a character flaw that's going to have actual impact in the mechanics of the game and rolling dice.
Yeah, quite a few hindrances, not all of them, but quite a few have some sort of, you know, impact mechanically. And, you know, going on that, if you play towards your hindrances, GMs are encouraged to give you a Benny for it, which that's a whole other ball of wax that we haven't talked about, is the bennies, the reward system that it's basically the currency the game runs on, where, you know, you give a Benny and you can use it to re-roll or soak damage, which is a, you know, so you don't get hurt. But, you know, it's another thing just to encourage you to act in character, right? Like, my character's a coward, so I'm gonna run away from this fight. Well, here's a Benny. Good job. You know, your team might not be happy with you, but you're acting like your character would act, right?
And I think
Right.
it's
So
important to have the more mechanical things going on, because in D&D they have flaws too, but how often do you actually see people doing that? So I'm kind of glad there's more of a you get this done kind of thing in it. But
Yep.
Steve over here plays his faults in D&D to a literal fault. He holds on to that fault.
well, I have lately gotten more interested in the role playing and, as you were saying, PV, the storytelling aspect of role play games, and less interested in the combat aspect of them. So that is something that I really have enjoyed about learning Savage World, because it seems like that it really provides some really good avenues for you to experience and explore the role-playing nature of it. So, when I heard about Savage World, it was from Carrie Smith's Deadlands, The Crossroads, right? And to watch the level of role-playing in there, and then to read up on Savage Worlds and see how that system was helping. And she's got great people on that show, and she's a wonderful,
Like me.
right, like you. She's a wonderful DM, but then to see that system after watching that game, seeing how that system fed or created this role play space, I really like that. So, but I don't want to just gloss over the bennies, because I love that aspect of the Savage World as well. So, generally speaking, a Benny is an opportunity to re-roll a dice, avoid taking some damage, draw a new card, and
One of the optional ones I like is influencing the story in a minor way, and I allow that at my table. So an example would be a wolf pack was trying to escape just the cops showing up. There was like this explosion and they wanted to get away. And is there a car nearby that has the keys in it? Well, I don't know this, you could do a luck roll, right? Like I like doing luck rolls where it's, 50% chance there's something there. But if you spend a Benny, then sure, there's a car there, you know?
right.
Just small things. Is there I think somebody was talking about this the other day. Is there a fire extinguisher in the room? I don't spend a Benny, there will be, right?
Right.
So that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So one last thing I want to talk about on Savage Worlds, the underpinnings, right? That core system, and that is the method by which order of combat is determined.
Yeah.
Right. So in Savage Worlds, they use a deck of cards, leave the jokers in, and when you get into combat, everybody is dealt a card, and the higher value your card, the sooner in combat you would go. And if there's ties, like two people got a jack, well, then there's an order of the suits of the card that can help break that tie. It's kind of cool. But what I really like about it is every round of combat, a card is drawn.
Yeah.
So I may go first in this round of combat and last in the next round of combat. And I really like that. How you've played this system before? How do you like that aspect of initiative for lesson one?
I hate like D&D. You get low in the order, and for the next 30 minutes or an hour or whatever, you're last in line to go. And I'll be honest, I don't run a ton of combat in Street Wolves because most of my missions that I've designed start out as an investigation that kind of leads from this to this, and there might be a little fist fight here or whatever. but I generally don't do bigger fights. They usually happen at the end because, you know, the players have screwed around enough and now somebody wants to kill them. But when I do run combat, it's so fun and exciting to just not be stuck in this same loop every time. You know, maybe some people like knowing that if they're going to be at top of the order, they're going to be top of the order the whole time. But I don't know. In practice, it's this exciting moment every round. You draw those cards, you know, you sort them out. Who gets what? Am I going to get, you know, did I get a good card, you know? And then, oh no, I'm at the bottom. I got, you know, and then, so there's all this extra drama injected in each round.
Yeah, and that's another opportunity to use bennies, right? You got a low card, you can use your benny to draw a new card.
Or if you have an edge, you can draw 2 cards right away or whatever.
Right. So Emily, PV just mentioned, you know, that he writes his scenarios more investigation heavy and then might culminate into a large fight at the end. I know when we switched over to Call of Cthulhu, that really tweaked your interest, right? The investigation and role play, instead of just let's travel from one combat encounter to another. So what are your thoughts? And you got any questions on that in that regard?
So I did have a question I was going to ask. So a lot of times, you know, when you're doing combat rounds in a standard initiative order, you start to like plan out strategically, like, you know, I know that Steve is going to move on his next turn, so I'm going to be able to, my turn before that, move to give him flanking. Do you find that you lose some of that strategical planning in this game system, or do you see it more as like on the fly kind of ingenuity?
Well, you know, I haven't really encountered that because honestly, I've really only played Savage Worlds as a player a little bit in Carrie's streams. Essentially, that's it. So I never really had that problem because in my head, generally, what I want to do when I'm doing combat is usually just shoot. I'm pretty.
Which is always a good.
I want to
option.
shoot or stab or I or throw something, but it is a crunchy enough system where once, especially in the combat area, where there's all these subsystems and pieces in place that if you really wanted to count how many squares there are and get kind of more in the weeds with tactics, you can, because Savage Worlds actually started as a minis combat game and it kind of grew out from there. Now, as far as screwing up your plans or whatever, I really haven't had a problem with that. I'll say the only problem I've had with that as a GM is there's been a few times where I'll have my big bad, right? And I'm not going to say which one or give an example because it's probably an adventure published
No
in the
spoilers.
future. No spoilers. But I had a big bad, and they had their speech and all this stuff, and they came up low in the order, and the heroes did a power, which we might talk about powers a little bit, and they rolled so high that it was basically like all the big bad and his biggest minion just got vaporized in like the one
He
turn.
didn't even get to do the big villain speech. That's a waste.
He got to talk a little bit, but you know, but that can happen really in any game, right? Like if you get low in the order and all of a sudden like you have 5 fighters, you know, smashing your big bad.
Definitely.
We
but
just
as
have
far
to
as
develop an edge that is called, you know, villain's monologue, and you can insert it
interject.
anywhere.
I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah.
That's a great one. No, but Steve, you're right. When we went to Call of Cthulhu, I was super interested in the investigation because it was nice to get to not just explore the storyline, but explore how your character reacts to the storyline. In our game, you know, the way that my character wants to handle problems is very different than the way John's character wants to, and then getting to see how those two people react with each other. It's almost like an experiment in human nature and getting to see how we problem solve and what things stand out to us, because sometimes, Steve will be saying, okay, well, here's these things. And me and John are like, it's this one thing over here. And in his mind, Steve is like, no, that means nothing. That is literally a piece of trash on the ground. But me and John are so sure that is an important piece of trash.
Yeah.
So I really like the role play and the investigation, because you get to kind of see how your players think and lean into that and give them that really fun experience that really tailors to what they enjoy. So I think it's a great premise.
Well, honestly, I don't really sell it as this or bring it up that often, but I am pretty heavily influenced by the game Delta Green, which is like Call of Cthulhu, but more nihilistic. So, like, what you're talking about is the investigations and, figuring things out, and the players trying to, like, have these discussions. Well, what should we do? Should we do this? And making tough choices. All that stuff really kind of sunk into me as like, this is the good stuff. And I do run Delta Green. I've been running Impossible Landscapes for almost a year now, it feels like. But I've run a bunch of other scenarios, and it's my favorite game to run that isn't Street Wolves. But so it's I can't say it hasn't influenced me, but it's Street Wolves is far less deadly, right? It's way more action, more over the top, even
Right.
though it is gritty, but it's not like, insta deaths or
Right.
or going insane or anything like that.
No, yeah, definitely.
Hey, so maybe you mentioned it and alluded to it. I guess the only part of Savage World system that we haven't done a broad brush stroke on is powers, right? How does weirdness or magic come into a Savage World setting? And that's basically where they use powers. Is that correct?
Yeah. So in Deadlands, for example, you have characters that have weird science, and that's technically a power. Or you have hucksters, which are magic casters that use cards to do their powers. And then there's also, like, all kinds of other games where there's superheroes and all that kind of stuff. In Street Wolves, I didn't want powers at first. It was more like, no, this is about street level, essentially detectives or problem solvers. It's not magic or any of this kind of stuff. But then as the synthwave influence kind of creeped its way into me, I added a sort of low-level low-level setting power thing where there's I don't know how much you want me to get into this, but
a lot.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm just going to read from the core book document right now. Now, there's cities around the world that something happened. And at night, there's all these colors in the sky. So basically to match synthwave art. Like, why is the sky always like a weird color, right? Well, because of this. That causes lights to glow and whatnot. And people say it's not harmful, but a very small portion of the population can get powers from it. And the powers aren't magic. They're basically like kind of weird science-y kind of based thing.
So that's a great transition into what I wanted to go into next, right? So we talked about Savage World. Cool. Now we understand the game system that it's built on. Let's get ourselves back to what we really want to talk about, and that's Street Wolves. So the great thing about that system is it's really setting agnostic, right? So now you get to take your retro-futuristic synthwave setting and place that on top of there. So I would love to hear some of what you could tell us about how you worked edges and hindrances that were setting specific to use those mechanics of the underlying system.
So, unfortunately for me, the Suede book had. I'm sorry, I have a phone that keeps going off here. The Suede book has these very good hindrances that apply to so many circumstances, especially the modern things I was thinking of. So I would sit there and I'd be, early in the development, I was like, oh, that'd be a great idea. I'd be writing stuff down and then I'd look it up and it's like, no, that's too similar to this hindrance or whatever. But I managed to come up with a few. So, you're just thinking about that world and what isn't addressed in the Savage Worlds book and what can flavor it thematically. So, one of the funny, and then also I like to have kind of funny things to make interesting scenarios happen in the game. So one of them is high score royalty, right? So that one is basically a video game addiction. You want to be at the top of the leaderboard at the local Pac-Man machine, right? And that one actually paid off. It was really funny. I ran a scenario where two of the characters had high score royalty, two of the players characters, and so then there was this whole scene where they were both trying to beat each other on a video game for like a portion. It was this really fun moment that just came out of this, hindrance I made.
And I lived through that exact moment multiple times in the 80s, where somebody is standing watch over somebody else to make sure they don't beat their high score, and then they beat it. And they're like, okay, now that person's got to get back on the game. And everybody else, it was almost like a sporting event, right? All the rest of us kids with very few quarters left in our pocket, standing around watching these two geniuses go at it.
Right.
Very 80s.
So that's one of the ones I managed to come up with. And there's some others. So I watched a lot of Miami Vice, a big influence on me for the game. And there's a lot of relationship type stuff in it, where bad romances and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to include any of that in a Street Wolves game. But if you want to, it's there because I'm trying to reflect that world where an ex-girlfriend can show up and screw up the mission because she has a vendetta against the bad guy you're going to fight, right? So there are some hindrances that are relationship based. So, unlucky in love, you end up falling for people that actually aren't very good matches, right? Or hard to love would be like you just give off this aura of like a jerk or something, right?
Yeah, John.
Or that 80s show, there's always that cop that, I guess they probably still use this trope today, that is just so emotionally unavailable for their girlfriend that there's always this side story going on about,
that'd be hard to love. Yeah. And then I also so I have a thing called drive in the game, which reflects like, that the cops are, working so hard and they just they're not making a difference, and so they seem to be kind of losing control, right? Like Sonny Crockett goes into like a gangster's house and beats him up in one of the episodes. And so drive kind of helps reflect that a bit. But so I have a hindrance that's cold-blooded, where it's like, you don't care, like, who cares? I do what I want. So you try to think of these things that are thematically appropriate and also at the same time enhance the things you've built into the game. You have all these pieces that kind of work together.
Right. So was it a combination, and how much of each did you get a chance to do? Was some of it just reskinning or reflavoring some of the existing hindrances, and how much of it was, really having to construct one from the ground up? The Sway book gives some really good guidelines for how to create your own, but also suggests that, maybe you could just take one that we've already done and name it something different if that works for you.
I try not to do the renaming just because it feels kind of cheap, and you can do that on your own. Like, right. Why am I going to rename this? You can just do this. The one I did do that with was, I can't think of the name. Wanted. That's it. I have Renegade, where it's the same thing essentially, except you didn't do the actual crime. And Wanted, you're wanted for a crime, and Renegaded, you're wanted for a crime that you didn't do. It's also named after the TV show starring Lorenzo Lamas. So yeah, I try to just come up with things that aren't in the book already, or if they are, try to come up with a different angle to it to justify its existence. And as far as edges go, I would kind of do the same thing. So, does it exist in the core book? Yes, well, I don't need to do anything with it. What is missing in the core book that might be helpful to a player?
So, John, what are your thoughts? I saw your face light up with the Lorenzo Lamas reference. So, thoughts, questions?
That was like one of my favorite shows when I was just a little one. I
Yeah,
used
so
to like.
it's not limited to the 80s. I am stealing things from the 90s too. So,
Well, we live in Georgia, and Georgia's a little bit backwards. So that line between 1989 and 1994, like
Very blurred.
everybody in 94 still have mullets here. So
They still have mullets.
I'm from Wisconsin, so we had the same thing, right? So,
but Renegade was one of my favorites, and I would be like 6 years old, just glued to the TV, like, what's gonna happen? And Xena and that other show that I don't like anymore.
okay.
But
yeah, I haven't watched as much Renegade as I'd like, but I definitely like, it fits into that genre of TV show of, mysterious stranger shows up to town, solves some problems, and then must move on, like, the Hulk or the A-Team, or there's so many shows where it's like you just move from town to town solving
it's kind of like
problems.
if they made a TV show out of Roadhouse, but instead of the one Roadhouse, it was like every Roadhouse.
Every town has a Roadhouse. Yeah.
All right, so PV, you started to talk about edges a little bit. So can you give us a little taste or hint of what some of the 80s themed edges are?
So there's quite a few that I have in the core book. It's probably a tie between my favorite ones right now, which one of them is Into the Groove. So essentially you're listening to music and it enhances your performance at driving or whatever. That's kind of a play on that trope that really is seen in Baby Driver. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie.
Love that movie.
Yeah, so where he's got he's listening to his music and the whole world around him makes sense. So Into the Groove is essentially that. I also really dig Fashionista. That one, because Street Wolves, there's so many investigations, and you're meeting with high society types or going to a nightclub or whatever. Fashionista allows you to know what kind of outfit is appropriate for the situation, and then gives you a bonus to like persuasion or whatever while you're at that thing.
That's
I really like that one, by the way.
That's brilliant.
When I read through the Jumpstart, I also like that you can actually use that to kind of buff up your other party members. Like,
yeah, you can tell them like
dress a little bit better,
right? Because that's the kind of stuff that would come up a lot in the original, in the first version of Street Wolves, and as I was developing it, it's like the team would want to go to a nightclub and they'd show up and they'd be completely wearing like, tactical outfits or something, right? Like, no, people are not going to treat you the same, if you don't look the part. So,
right. Yeah, it wasn't until the late 90s that you could, wear combat gear to a party and fit in.
There you go. Otherwise, two other ones that I'm still kind of working on. A Smooth Operator is a seduction bonus based on the song title. All in the Reflexes, which is you can catch thrown weapons, which is a Big Trouble in Little China callback. By the way, I hope no copyright lawyers are listening right now because I could get in trouble. And one that I gotta test more is one-liner ace. And so if you dispatch an enemy, there's a chance that you can get bennies, but you have to make like a one-liner, like chill out or whatever after you've killed them with an ice pick or something, you know.
Dude, I have to have that edge for any character that I select. Perfect. Yeah. So the equipment, you started to talk about the equipment. I imagine that the equipment area was just ripe for you to have some 80s retro-futuristic fun. And I know from reading the Jumpstart that, you go over the pager, bag phones. I mean, there's just a bunch of stuff you could grab there. How did you go through that? What was it like?
So I ended up looking at a lot of there's Instagram. They've got all these accounts that are like New Wave Retro or whatever, and they'll share prototype stuff, things that didn't quite exist, things that did exist but you didn't hear about. So I did a lot of research on that sort of thing of like, well, what would work for this setting? Unfortunately, so like I said, Savage Worlds is basically mid-crunch. So there's not a ton of nuance in the gear as far as like weapons, right? Like pistols. Like you could look at a list of pistols, but they're essentially very close to each other in some ways, right? Like so there's a lot of things I like that I want to put into the game, but maybe don't have that mechanical benefit. It's more of, like I'm not going to list like a fax machine, right, in the gear list. But there's certain things where I think, okay, well that thing can put into the game and it gives it some sort of flavor, and I can associate a cost to it, like what is a laptop in this, right? And well, a laptop probably uses a floppy disk, so I got to put a floppy disk in there. Or if it's super expensive, it can use a CD-ROM drive, right? So that's kind of how I went through it. Was like, what are essential pieces of equipment that I can add this to flavor it, that an agent might be carrying around or operative might be carrying around, and what are some other things that may interact with that thing, and then add those things. A big thing in the game is VR. So it's that world in the 90s where, you'd watch a TV show or whatever, and a person put on big VR goggles, and they're in this VR world, and it's the next big thing, and it's amazing. That's real in Street Wolves. Like, VR is a big thing. So there's like 3 VR kits, and there's some rules around VR, but I am, again, not super strong mechanically minded. There's a good guideline for how to use VR for like things like hacking, but I don't have a whole hacking system that's new, right? That for this, I would recommend instead picking up Sprawl Runners, which you can pull pieces out of that if you want. There's this thing called fast lane hacking if you really wanted to get in hacking. Otherwise, I say use dramatic text. I'm sorry if this is all too deep.
No, it fits well into a question that I was about to ask. So,
okay.
So I mean, you could just set hacking up as a skill, right? If you just want to go very basic with it and not put layers of mechanics on top of it, and so I'm a hacker. But as I was looking through the Jumpstart and looking at some of the equipment, like there were laptops and there was VR. But one thing I loved was you explicitly pointed out, but there was no internet. There was no connectivity to all of this stuff. So I couldn't sit at my house, use my hacking skill, and hack into the computer of Evil Corp to get the information, right?
If you watched War Games, it was possible.
That's right.
So I say that a lot of that stuff is more rare, that remote network connection stuff.
So it sets up the possibility for some great adventures and scenarios where, the street wolves have to infiltrate some building to be able to get into their computer system to get the data or the evidence or whatnot.
Yeah, it's more of that old school. You have to be on site a lot of times, because the way networks are set up is there is the internet. It's very not as widely adopted, so it's a lot of closed networks, like AOL or whatever. So one of the ideas I have is, like, if you want to break into Evil Corp's network, well, then you go to an Evil Corp site, satellite branch or something, and then you can then connect to their network from there. I haven't actually, and this is funny, I haven't played a lot of Cyberpunk, and that's why I don't really feel comfortable getting into all the hacking stuff as much, but I feel like I have enough there that if you wanted to expand it, you could. But so one of the things I have in mind is that, there's that issue of hacking in Cyberpunk, I've heard, where the hacker is off having their hacking adventure, and then what do you do with the other characters? Well, in Street Wolves, if you put on VR gear and you're hacking that way, you're basically using all your skills and stuff that you have. The hacker can just get you into the system, and then once you're into the system, you're all running around shooting all your digital guns or whatever. So you could handle it like a regular encounter then if you wanted to.
Emily, what you thinking? What kind of questions you got?
I was just really enveloped in the thought of hacking and going to the locations and breaking in, and I was getting carried away with my imagination of like 80s, like dodge roll through corridors and laser beam hallways and all that good stuff. So I was just enjoying.
It's reminded me of a lot of 80s movies where you actually had to get into the place to, put your little memory stick into one of their computers to pull something out. Whereas, in the 2000s and 2010s, 2020s movies now, you can see the hacker just sitting somewhere very remote and hacking in. It's a whole different vibe, but I really like that 80s vibe where there was that infiltration part physically before you could get to the virtual infiltration part. So
yeah, John, that's sorry.
No, go ahead, Peter.
I was just going to say, yeah, that's a big part of one of the reasons why I like this setting, besides nostalgia, is I love the whole limitations, where you can't just sit and look things up. Where that's one reason I talked about Delta Green earlier. One reason why I enjoy running Delta Green in the 1990s is, yes, there's an internet. Yes, you can look things up, but you're so much more limited. Like, your cell phone is basically a phone most of the times, right? And so I enjoy that aspect of it, where there's these limitations within it, but then in Street Wolves, there's these fun things where you're going to make a phone call and it's a video phone. And we had, I don't want to spoil a Jumpstart. The players had to make a phone call, but then it was a video phone. So then they kind of dressed themselves up, and then they put like a jacket over it so they couldn't see that they're calling from the street. I don't know, just fun stuff like that. That's just kind of makes you laugh or whatever.
John, what are you thinking? What kind of questions have you got for Vincent?
This brings up a lot of. I looked a little bit around in your Discord through the dev notes and all that, because I was just curious, like, what was going through your head. And
oh boy,
Stalker.
Sorry.
Oh, it was very interesting to me, at least, but I have a weird little brain. But at what point were you like, you know what, this hacking stuff, maybe I should push it aside for right now and concentrate on the things that I think I can do a little bit more with? Was there a breaking point for it, or was it kind of a...
Yeah, I was never super comfortable with it. It worked. We ran at least one session, and it worked. The player had this incredible roll where they hacked through like 6 layers of whatever in one roll because of the exploding dice. But I just never felt really comfortable with it, and I'm sure other people have done that better. So you know what? I'm going to strip out what isn't working for me, doesn't make me feel good, and then kind of massage it into the existing Savage World settings where you can make it a dramatic task, and here's how you can make it a dramatic task. And then once I did that, I felt a lot better. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest, because I just, in my head, I have these negative people living in there, and I released the book, and then they're just like, "Oh, this hacking's terrible," and I'm like, "I knew it." So I kind of listen to those inner critics. So maybe you shouldn't all the time, but I feel like at that point it was the right decision.
That reminds me of another thing too that I was thinking about. I know imposter syndrome is a big word today, and I've seen sometimes where you're like kind of seemingly struggling with it yourself, and I was wondering if you had a special trick to get through it, or if it was kind of a you just give it some time thing.
So what I'm about to say may be controversial, but
no.
this is exclusive. I don't feel
You heard
like
it here first, folks.
I don't feel like I have imposter syndrome, because I feel like whatever I write is as good as what other people have done. Like I don't feel like I don't belong in this space or anything like that. What I do suffer from is low self-esteem and anxiety. And I think they kind of feed into each other, but more like it's more like I I I realize that nobody knows what they're doing for imposter syndrome. Nobody knows what they're doing. We're all faking it. Everyone's a fraud. There might be people who know more than you. They know a little bit more than you, and that's why they're where they are. But they started out just like you, you know. So for me, it's more about fighting negative self-image, and to do that, a lot of times it's mostly recognizing those thoughts as they occur and then addressing them. So, you're not good enough, whatever. You have to be like, no, stop it. Those are bad thoughts. They're irrational. It's that whole thing of your own worst critic. There's a scene. Now, anybody here watch Deadwood?
Oh, I love it.
Okay, there's this scene where Jody is suffering from severe depression, and she hates herself, and there's that moment where, I can't think of his name, and he's like, well, what did you think about Wild Bill? And she says, I love Wild Bill, he was a great man. And he's like, do you know he felt about himself like you feel about yourself, and do you think he would have been a good judge of his own character? And she's like, no. And that's kind of how I look at it. It's like, you know you may think bad things about yourself, but others probably don't, right? Unless you're a terrible person.
Which you are not, and you are very well, highly thought of in the TTRPG space.
See, now I'm just gonna get a big head and become a big jerk.
Big jerk.
Well,
Big problem.
When that happens, I'm just going to remind you. I took a note. This is a direct quote from PVincent. Everybody's faking it. Nobody knows what they're doing.
Exactly.
Nobody knows.
I love that. I actually had to write that one down. So, all right. So you put together, you conceptualize like 80s synthwave, retro-futuristic. I'm making this game. I'm building this book. I'm going to put out a Jumpstart, right? And so the the goal of a Jumpstart is to quickly and easily, and correct me if I'm wrong, and if this wasn't your goal, then you can explain it, but to give people a quick, easy way to dip their toe into your thing, your game, your world, or to quickly submerge themselves. So that kind of drives a couple things, right? One, you got to give them quick synopsis of what the thing is, not as much as you put in the full book. You kind of got to give them some pre-gen characters, and you kind of got to give them that first adventure that they could run. That is rules light. Let them see how fun this is. So talk to me some about pre-gen characters, and without giving anything away, the process of deciding what adventure you're going to tag onto your Jumpstart.
So the Jumpstart was mostly, so I wasn't going to do one originally, but just it kind of developed where I have to have so many releases on drive-through in order to become verified or whatever. And I was like, I'm just going to have the core book out there. So I came up with the Jumpstart archetypes and then the core book. The Jumpstart characters, whenever I've come up with characters for the game for other people to use, I try to look for interesting tropes and then turn them on their head a little bit, and have like a diverse cast of characters that you normally didn't see as the leads, right? Every pre-gen character I make, I see as the lead, right? Because it's the lead in that player's story, right? So I try to come up with interesting options, and I had bigger stories for them, but they ended up getting cut out because of space. And as far as the adventure goes, that was like, I don't have any adventures that will work for this. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I started brainstorming. That adventure was supposed to be a lot shorter, but I can't help myself. I write really long adventures that are super detailed. I kind of went, and I talked about Delta Green. I go to the Delta Green School of Adventure Writing where there's a lot of detail. So even though it's not, I try not to railroad particularly. I try to just present a bunch of options, and some of those I probably don't have to present. I don't want to spoil anything, so I won't go too deep into it. But there's certain things where it's like, well, characters are probably not going to find this thing. The players are probably not going to find this thing. But I wanted to put it in there just in case, but also give a GM maybe an extra detail on maybe a future adventure they could run. Maybe they could include that thing. But you were talking about cutting out stuff or presenting just the right amount of things for somebody to jump into it. And I had way too much in it originally. And one DM to another, that's her Twitter handle. She came down on me.
I thought you were about to tell me a secret.
Right.
No. One DM to another is her Twitter handle. Victoria. She was really funny. She came at gave me academic advice where it was kind of very straightforward. She's like, cut this. You don't need this. And that was the first time somebody was as straightforward with me, because everyone's trying to be really nice and encouraging, and they don't want to be like, you don't need this sucks or whatever. She didn't say that, but that really kicked me into gear where it's like, I gotta get rid of all this stuff. Then, she's totally right, so I, thank you for that. Because the Jumpstart was a lot better then. It was more streamlined. There are people that want more detail on things. It's like, I understand that, but that's what the core book is for. This thing is, people have paid money, which is really awesome. And I'm so grateful for anybody that's given me $1 or way more. Some people have given a lot more. super grateful, but essentially this thing is a free product, and I didn't want to like, you know, give everything away on this go around. So
Sure. Well, so let's talk about the Jumpstart more structurally. Like, it's beautiful, PV. The art. I saw
you're making me
discussion.
blush.
Yeah, and it's coming through on the camera really well too. I saw a discussion you had on Twitter where you kind of laid out some here are things I've come to understand or learned through this process. And you were talking about contrast of your typeset, right? The words you've got on the paper and the background. The blast of color and that neon 80s look to the art, and with on the sides of the pages, and then that high contrast white and black type. It reads and looks very appealing, but it also kind of put me in the setting as well. So
Mission accomplished.
Yeah. So exactly what you're trying to do. Check the box.
Yeah.
So how was, coming up with the idea, and what were the edges and hindrances? Okay, that's all the fun part of it. But then the nug work of how do I lay this thing out and how do I present it in such a way? What was that like, that process of going through that?
So I'm a web designer essentially in my day job. And that's something where it's like I fake it till you make it. Probably why I feel less of an imposter. And so I've done web and UI UX work for the last few years. And so I'm kind of in that world of trying to present something that's clear and focused and looks nice, making that balance of form and function. I'm not the world's best designer by any means. There's people who are way better than me. Like, I put myself at fairly competent. What I did for this was I just went around and looked at examples. Now, it was a little hard because there's not a lot of synthwave publications. It's mostly a lot of cyberpunk, which is not synthwave. But I tried to look at what is in synthwave art. What do I see a lot of? How do I replicate that in a layout? So shapes and colors and all these sorts of things, some kind of futuristic text. And, you look at the fundamentals of design for magazine layouts or book layouts. Like, I'm not somebody that has a ton of role-playing game books. And a lot of the ones I have are really old. But, I page through them to see what works in those. And the reason why there's those sidebars was I wanted to do the white background because most RPGs you'll see they'll have some sort of textured background. So D&D, it's like parchment paper. Delta Green, they do everything kind of like on. A lot of it looks like it's been printed on something. But it was like, well, how do I do that with synthwave because it's so dark? Well, I'll do a white background for the text, colored bars on the sides to kind of make up for the lack of the color on the main page. I am very tempted to, and I'm probably going to make a dark mode version of this, maybe the Jumpstart, but the core book probably, where it's that black background and white text. And I would do both versions. So it's a good amount of work. So I haven't quite, guaranteed that will happen. But I feel like that would look really good if I can pull it off. One thing about colors, and here's another big exclusive. I've said this before, but I don't make a big deal about it. I'm partially colorblind. I don't see every color that most people do.
Wow.
So the way I get around that is I use color palettes. And there's this wonderful color palette that somebody put out there. It's like the Outrun color palette. And it's got all these colors in sets. And I just use that. I just color sample. I take those colors and, if I'm making a gradient, I'll say, okay, well, what are the 5 colors here that'll work? And then if somebody tells me, why is this purple when it should be blue? Like, why is the ocean purple or whatever? I'm like, oops, sorry, I didn't realize that.
Whoopsie.
I can, and don't get me wrong, I can see a lot of colors. It's just, it's like a narrower band than most other people. So
John,
it feels good to confess that out loud.
Yeah,
well, I'm glad you can confide in us.
John, you've looked all through the Jumpstart as well, and you're kind of our resident layout person. How did it feel to you looking at that thing? The layout, the art, the contrast.
I thought it was great, but full disclosure, I'm red-green colorblind as well, so...
Nice.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, wait, our graphics artist is colorblind. You guys did an amazing job.
I mean, I thought it looked great. I could be completely wrong, but...
You're not.
I mean, I could be wrong, too. I think it really works for what it is, and I've been really super honored that people have liked it. Because, like I said, I don't feel like I'm the strongest designer in the world, but, this is the first time I've ever felt really confident about this particular... Like, I'm not really a graphic design person either, right? That's kind of a different ball of wax, right? And I was just glad that a lot of my skills that I do have, I was able to transfer over to this.
It's aesthetically pleasing, but it has good function. So it is a lot like a website. Like, you get the information you need, and it's nice, and it guides your eyes to where they need to go. So I feel like you did the job great.
I just realized a correlation that sometimes I see John doing, and I kind of noticed in yours, and I didn't make the connection till now, but there were times where, John does this, and I saw in your stuff that I was like, wow, that's a really great, like color palette together. And I'm like, it's such a unique choice, but it pops so much. And I'm like, I would have never thought of that. And I think John does the same thing sometimes, that when you are, struggling with those color differences, that you may pick unconventional color matches. And for the synthwave, it almost works really well because it kind of gives that contractual tone to it. And I think that's part of why it works so well, is that you have these non-conventional hues that just pop so well together, whereas me, I'm going to pick beiges across the board because, I'm comfortable with that. So.
Yeah, I probably pick more colorful colors just because I can't see the other ones,
But it worked in your favor because that synthwave kind of look, it gives you that kind of like almost negative white balance kind of look to it, where they kind of juxtapose, but in a really cool way. So I think it worked out really well in your favor.
All right, so it is beautiful. It is.
I gotta write you guys a big check.
Yeah, so John will just hook you up with our Venmo.
There's
just writing anything out, but just visually, it is very appealing from the cover to the back page. All very appealing. But having actually gone through and read all the words, the content is really good there too. I feel like I got a taste. You didn't reveal everything, so now I want the full book. And it's been pretty well received. Where are you at on downloads? I got a hint from Twitter today, but I'm just
I was at 400. I cracked 400. I have.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I was hoping I'd get 50. So we're at 400. I don't know how many people have actually looked at it. I mean, besides you, you just put something out there, and lots of times you don't hear anything about it. but I feel at this point it's really like slowed down to a real trickle. So, I might break 500 in a couple weeks, maybe if I'm lucky. But I'm just happy. Like this has been a big success as far as getting a taster out there to show what is coming, to get people excited about it. Everyone who's going to get excited, and then once the core comes out, if people want or are interested but aren't quite into it, the Jumpstart's there, right? They can try that first. And also the other thing that I didn't mention before, that one reason why I decided to go with the Jumpstart was I could work out a lot of the layout things, because when I'm doing layout, I look at it like I'm doing the software thing, is I'm building up components that I can reuse later. So what does the sidebar look like? What is, the headlines and the, all these pieces, and I can just rearrange them as I move along. So I have almost every major, like I don't know if there's any tables in the Jumpstart. There might be in the equipment section. I think there are in the equipment section.
Right.
But I have tables designed. I have all these pieces designed. So once I actually get to the layout of the core book, then it'll be a lot faster, and there won't be as much of this. Like the problem with the design too is like I'll think of something cool, I'll do it, and it sucks, and I've spent like 6 hours on it, right?
Right.
And then you got to try a different design and a different. So now a lot of that is out of the way.
John, you know a little something about that, don't you?
A little bit, yeah.
Spending 6 hours on something and it didn't work at the end?
Or like you follow a tutorial and it's not a good tutorial, and you can't, like, this isn't what I wanted. That's happened before too.
So
Or
a
you
lot
just realize when you actually see it, that you've made like your grandma's house or something, and you're like, no.
Tear it
I don't
down.
want that.
So congratulations on the success of the Jumpstart.
Thank you.
Tell me about the book, the full.
What do you want to know?
What can I expect? Like, are there going to be more Pregen characters? Are you going to include a few more scenarios? Are we looking at a bevy more of hindrances and edges? So, because I'm excited to get the whole thing. So, what can you tip off of?
So there's a ton that's not in the Jumpstart. So way more details on drive and relationships. That there's a lot more equipment. Obviously we talked about that. I might strip out the adventure in the core book and make it a little simpler and put that in something else. So I'm gonna probably work on writing a new one soon. What else? I'm trying to think.
Is it going to be more like helping you build like the sandbox type like world, so you have a better understanding of the whole world kind of deal?
There's a lot of that. So I give a lot of examples on the different types of adventures you can run. So like, what's an assault mission? What's what's an investigation? I don't go too deep into it because there's a whole role-playing game websites that really go into that. But just real tips on how to do that stuff. Some random mission generators. I've got some stuff to flavor chases a little bit more. So like random tables. So, the car runs into the fruit stand or whatever, that kind of stuff.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Runs through the fruit stand.
That's all the 80s it explodes. Right. The melons explode and everything, and then the
chase scenes are
the windshield wipers. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know what I can't. I forgot some of the question there. What else were you looking for?
I was just trying to get as much out of you about the full book as possible. So
yeah,
when the full book comes out, is it going to be PDF? Will there be a hard copy option through drive-through?
It's probably going to be PDF to start. and then I can work, because there's some things I kind of have to fix in the Jumpstart, just little things. So I'm going to do the same thing with the core book, where release it, have some fixes, because there'll be something wrong with it, and then update it. And then once it's to a point I feel confident that all, like those typos or whatever glitches are taken care of, then I'll look at possibly a Kickstarter to fund a a physical copy.
Yeah.
I'm not so hot on print on demand, because I've heard mixed results about drive-throughs, print on demand, and I feel like I want to give people, and this is like what I'm doing with the merch thing, is I want to give people the best thing for their dollar. I don't want some junky book out there, right? So, the way I see it is, if we get a physical edition out, then that, I don't know what would be in the rewards, but maybe more art or more adventures, or just things to help, fund it and make it a little more. And then one thing I was thinking about, I said this on Twitter, I think last night, was that if you buy the PDF before the Kickstarter comes out, before the print, then I want to find a way to reward you for that. So maybe you keep your electronic receipt and then give it to me, and then I put you in a higher tier where you get some stuff and a coupon or something. Just something to make up for the fact, because I don't want to make you double dip, right? Like I would feel bad. Why would anybody pay $20 for whatever, and then another?
We literally do that all the time. We literally do it all the time.
Well, maybe
Chat,
I don't need to hook you up with a coupon then. So.
No, we're fine. I was gonna say, chat did agree way earlier that we wanted wall-size posters. If you could just put that in there for us.
All right, so that's a good transition, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about was merch, right? You put some prototype photos out on Twitter. I got to have one of the coffee mugs because it was just so cool. So you're working through that now. Merch isn't out and available yet, but you are working. And tell us what we can expect.
I'm hoping that in a couple of weeks to have at least 2 shirt designs. One would be just says Street Wolves, and then the other would be Kimberly Tiffany, who is a NPC in the adventure, who hopefully you get to meet. She came about as like a yes-anding, and became a fan favorite of the 2 groups that ran the adventure. But so she's going to have her own shirt. And then I was going to do a poster right away, but I've had too many problems with the 2 prototypes. The one didn't ever arrive because the tube was empty. The other one was crushed and it had print lines all over it. So I'm probably just going to bite the bullet and have a small print run done. And then maybe have, I don't know, 20 or something like that on hand, and see how that goes. Coffee mug, that should look good, but I want to make sure, because I redesigned it a little bit. And I think there was something else I wanted up there, but
Fanny Pack.
That would be perfect.
They don't have any Fanny Pack. Yeah, I've looked up some of this stuff, and it's just like, first of all, I don't want to store a bunch of stuff that might not ever sell in my house.
Right.
And then the other is like, you'd have to have this huge. Like, do I want to spend $500 on 70 Fanny Packs or whatever it is, right? Or would I rather spend that money on art for the book, right? Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
That's one reason why I am trying Printify, which is that it's like the middleman where they take the orders and then send them off to the printers. Well, we'll see how that works. Hopefully, if people are dissatisfied, I'll just cut it off, because I don't want junk, right? I don't want people to feel bad when they get something in the mail.
All right, so love the Jumpstart. Looking forward to the book. Probably this coming Thursday, we're going to play the Jumpstart adventure.
Good. Yeah.
If I recall correctly from Dev Notes, that will be the 7-year anniversary of your first post about the GI Joe
Oh,
game you wanted
Lord.
to make.
Yeah,
John's
totally.
been Twitter stalking you.
Yeah. No, that's in
Discord.
Discord. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I've been working on Street Wolves for 2 years essentially, in its current form.
So people out there that are like, hey, Emily told us she really wants to get into, writing adventures or scenarios. Other people out there want to, build their own game like you did. 2 years you've been working on this, and then several years before that with the old GI Joe. What kind of lessons learned do you have for people that would, want to do what you did, or some pieces of what you did?
Don't be like me and then decide you want to write a big book and then write the whole book. That's so that, I wrote that GI Joe clone. Like, I actually did that, and I did the layout, and the layout sucked, 7 years ago or whatever. I wrote the whole book, and then I just trashed it. Like, if you can think of a smaller way to get started, like maybe just do some pre-generated characters, or like in Savage Worlds, there's these one-pagers. They're just 1 or 2 pages of real short adventures. If you could do that, just don't write a big giant book right away.
Yeah, well,
it takes too long.
About,
it took me
right.
2 years to get out of Jumpstart, right? Like that, I could have had other things out and built up excitement, but.
And you could, using the base Savage World system, right, just write some scenarios that use nothing but the basics there, and then kind of let your world and setting build itself as you run these things and create these things. And capture
you can get a fan license and publish pretty much whatever you want, as long as you don't charge money for it. If you're violating copyrights or whatever, that's on you, not on Pinnacle. But like if you wanted to write fan versions of whatever and just get your beak wet or whatever, feet wet, do that. D&D 5e is so much bigger than Savage Worlds. Like, if you want attention, I would say focus on 5e right now. But for me, it's more about, this is a hobby and a passion of mine. I'd like to make the money back that I've spent on the project, but it's not a money-making thing. But yeah, I guess, always keep in mind that nobody's, especially when you start, nobody's going to care about your thing more than you do. But over time, as you make connections and people see the things you make, and then you should find people that respond positively to it, and then you kind of like engage with them and encourage them and their passions, and then that kind of ignites you too, right? Like this whole show today, right? Like, this is from like you guys seeing it and getting really excited about it, right? But 2 years ago, when I was out there and I'm like typing and I'm like, I'm making this game, right? And then I share maybe like a bad Photoshop thing. I mean, people might think it's neat, but they're not going to care, right?
Right.
You have to keep that ball moving yourself, and keep making those connections and releasing those things and showing people, and hopefully they'll respond. Like, I'm talking like I'm a big expert. I might have like one Jumpstart out. That's it.
Of the 4 of us, you're the biggest.
You are, the biggest expert in the room.
So I've got one more question for you, and then I'm going to let you answer that question, and then use that opportunity to whatever else you'd like to say as we kind of start to wrap these things up. So I'll let you just whatever you'd like to say about Street Wolves. But here's my question for you, right, without giving away spoilers, if you can. What advice do you have for me, Steve, at Rick Stevens PI, for running your Jumpstart adventure in a few days? as the game master?
I almost feel like I should take my headset off and like
no,
let you have
I'll
a
be
private
general.
conversation.
I'll be general. I would say listen to your players. Do what they go with what they think is fun, but also look for all the escape hatches in the adventure to get them back on track. Like I said, I don't want a railroad, but there's also things where, you know, if they're lost or don't know what to do or they're making a really big mistake, there's some things built into there. It'd be like, give them a little hint, right?
That's
Be
good advice
prepared.
because these two are always lost, don't know what to do, and are making mistakes.
And he never listens. So
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, continue.
And I would say that adventure. So I'll be honest. Like, I like the adventure because of the way it kind of shows you the whole world. But it's also not my favorite one that I've run. I mean, I think that's fair that I could say it's not my favorite because it kind of puts the characters into a moral position that they could go and do bad things. Again, I can't really say exactly what it is, but they could go ahead and do like evil things, and I'm generally not that guy. I don't like bad things happening. I don't like play I ran D&D for a little while, and the players were torturing goblins, and I just said straight up, if you want to play the torture game, I'm not the guy to run this game because that does not interest me.
Yeah, and that's not our thing either. We don't.
Right. So,
but moral gray area, that is fun to play.
I like
as long
gray.
as we don't make it an evil campaign.
But this one, you can kind of start veering into that. Like, oh boy, they did some nasty stuff, and they, again, I can't get into it. But
well, those '80s cop movies, right? Miami Vice, it happened a lot where the cops who are upholding the law sometimes bend or break it a little bit for the cause of justice, right? It's the only way I'm going to get that bad guy is if I do this slightly illegal thing.
It's one reason why I like Miami Vice so much is the moral gray areas where the job essentially breaks the main heroes. Spoiler, the end of this series is Crockett and Tubbs quitting because they realize that what they're doing isn't making a difference, right? Like, that's intense. That was pretty, it was kind of something you didn't really see in the 80s, right? With the cops or whatever. Like, the job took too much toll on these guys, so then they quit. And I like that, where it's there's that degradation. I can't even say the word right now. Eventually they just, that's what I mean. Thank you.
You're welcome.
+1 Benny.
You heard it here, folks. I got a Benny.
I just enjoy that kind of moral play of, going over the edge and coming back. Like, I don't like going all the way to over the edge. That doesn't interest me. But so that's like we're talking about Street Wolves with the drive. That's one of the reasons why drive is in there, to reflect that battle against yourself.
Yeah, it really fits well with the setting, right? Because bright neon lights, but dark, gritty streets.
Yeah.
John, you got any final questions for PV or observations?
I did want to say I really love the drive component coming from Call of Cthulhu, which has sanity. It resembles that a little bit, but
yeah,
I think it's done differently in a way that sounds a little more fun, maybe.
It's like sanity, but also a little like the dark side points in a Star Wars game, where you do evil things and you gain dark side points in that, right? Like, and the more you gain, the more you're going to be evil. it's kind of like that, but not really. I don't want to get too much into it, but it does kind of really help reflect the ideas that I have for this setting. So,
And I also was
is there?
curious.
Oh, go on.
You can go ahead.
No. Please.
Mine could be more of a round out the thing question. So if you had something, you go first.
Oh, I was gonna say if there were any questions in the chat. I haven't even been looking at chats or.
Not recently.
Okay.
Yeah,
Everyone
there were
left.
some.
It was mostly about the posters.
Yeah, no, we've had some questions in chat, and Emily's done a good job of kind of working those in for us.
Okay.
And there's still we've still got a good following on there in chat. So thanks everybody for tuning in. If you don't have it already, the links to get the Street Wolves Jumpstart are there in chat. Emily, you got any parting shots for PV or any last questions?
I'm super excited to see how this plays out. I love playing new stuff and getting to experience things that I have known nothing about. Very, very excited to see your core book. Like I said, I've been trying to get into writing modules and things like that, but I'm a very fly by the seat of your pants DM. I hardly ever actually write out a story. I just wait for the characters to be like, what if the bad guy does this? And then they like throw it away. And I'm like, that was a great idea. I'm very much kind of DM. So I struggle with planning ahead. But the more I play other people's stuff, the more I can kind of see people's thought process. So I'm really interested to get to see inside yours and see how you see things playing out and what's important and all that stuff. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, I would say just on that note, if just read lots of adventures, see what's out there, and if you want to write the more traditional Savage Worlds one sheets, or there's a bunch of free ones out there that you can just download and just start scanning and just kind of absorb it, because those are pretty free form. They have an idea, and then they kind of just play out where you can just, oh, the characters could do this or that, and that's basically it. It doesn't really get too deep into it. That might appeal to you.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Thank you.
So PV, tell everybody one more time where they can find you on socials, and if you have any last things you'd like to say about Street Wolves in general or Jumpstart in particular.
Not really. I'm sorry I talked your ear off. You can find me at TableCatGames on Twitter, where I'll talk your ear off there. I am on Instagram too, but I hardly ever use it. Mostly that's for sharing pictures of my cats.
That's the quality content right there.
Yeah, there you go. That's the exclusives of the cats. There's also the Discord if you want to join and talk about the game, or even potentially see if you want other people to play with you. We've got a few people on there. Yeah, that's about it, I guess.
Well, hey, thanks a lot for coming on and talking to us about this. You didn't talk too much. I enjoyed every minute of it. I've been dying to ask you some questions, and it's not often you get the opportunity to talk to the person who wrote this thing that you're really interested in and that you really like. So
I'd say reach out to small content creators if you want to talk about anything with them, because we're looking for people to, first of all, I like talking about this thing that I made. Second of all, I want to get word out there. And so a lot of us content creators, we're just shouting on Twitter all day. A lot of times it's the same people, right? Sure. So, in this format is also fun too. So it's just see if anybody else out there wants to chat about this kind of stuff, and you probably get a lot of people that would be excited to talk about it.
So we appreciate you coming on. We've really enjoyed it. We hope you've enjoyed it too. For everybody,
that was awesome.
That's great. Mondays from 6 to about 8ish, we talking TTRPG stuff, and Thursdays from 6 to 8, we are doing actual plays. And this Thursday, come watch us take a shot at the Jumpstart for Street Wolves. I can tell you we are very honest about the way we play. So as you're watching, you'll probably see what it'd be like for you to go through it the first time. Where I'm going to tell John, hold on a second, I got to look something up. But we're very open and honest. We do it. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I put in a plug for your show? I saw a little bit that I found interesting. It was a Call of Cthulhu, and there was a giant baby, I think.
Yes.
Right?
That was our last.
I really like that. So everyone check that out. Giant baby.
That was our Mr.
baby.
Corbett scenario, which we just finished up last Thursday. This huge baby monster that
the Mambagari.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. And
he was eating Cheerios, and I was like, I love this. This is good. So
it tried to eat me.
Oh,
it did.
Oh no.
So, hey, everybody, check us out on Monday nights. Come back on Thursday night, see the actual play. PV, again, thank you so much for joining us. We're Percentile Vice, and thanks, everybody, for coming.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.